Hello and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Vanessa. I like to talk about books. Straight off the bat, I wanted to wear this cute girly outfit. I realised I couldn't fit into it, so as I was taking this outfit off, my hair went a mess. I was looking cute, okay? I had this lovely hairstyle going on, realised, oh god, I'm in my pyjamas, need to change into something cute. Tried to put this beautiful pink flowery dress on, and it just went a mess. So now I'm wearing my husband's t-shirt with these uneven space buns, looking like a mess. So today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in January and February, with one addition from December because I just forgot to talk about it in December. So I'm going to title this like a winter wrap up, but it's not inclusive of everything that I read in winter, and I will be doing March's individually and then April's and May, back to the usual schedule. There's 7 books to talk about today. Some of them I can't remember anything about, but we're just gonna jump right into it anyway. Oh, and also this is like a wide range of genres. There's middle grade, young adult, adult. So I'm gonna timestamp them down below because not everyone's reading taste is diverse as mine. So if there's just specific books that you want, just have a look at the timestamps. But first off, I'm going to talk about Roan and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is the 3rd and final book in the Grisha Triology, soon to be a Netflix series. I read the first book many years ago but didn't like it, but kept on to it anyway, just on the off chance that I might want to reread it because I had the second book and I didn't want to waste the second book. And I reread the first book last year and actually really enjoyed it. Had a totally different reading experience to the first time I read it. So I read the second one, Rebecca got me the third one as a present, and I just dove straight into it as soon as I got it. I'd heard a lot of mixed things about this book before going into it. A lot of people saying it didn't stand up to the first 2 books, and I somewhat agree with that. I did overall enjoy this book. As a season finale though, the series finale, it did kind of let me down a bit, but the plot went in a natural way that I thought it was going to. But maybe that's just because, unpopular opinion, but I actually like Mal as a character. The one thing that it did lack was the Darkling. I'm going to keep it as spoiler free as possible, but there was a significant lack of one of the best characters in this series in this book, which I can totally see why, if people are fans of the series because of the Darkling, that they might not have liked this book. The twists in this were kind of expected, but that definitely didn't make the reading experience any worse in my opinion. For such a short book, I think it packed a lot of punch, and I thought the characters remained true to themselves. I think I rated this 3.5 stars, and overall I just thought that this book was an addition to the series that made sense. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, and it certainly didn't like bring the series up significantly. It just sort of like was on par with the first 2 books, I guess. There's certainly nothing about this book that I would change. So yeah, I guess it was an okay, enjoyable reading experience. Next I'm going to talk about, I'm going to say, yeah, this is my favourite read in this video. Definitely a new favourite, something that I've not stopped talking about since I've read it. It's definitely put me in a reading slump, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was one of my 5-star predictions for this year. Well, for life really, because I'd been hearing so many good things about it, and it's certainly lived up to its expectation, which is a total rare occurrence for me. I absolutely adored this book. This book follows the life of Evelyn Hugo. So at the start of the novel we are set in the present day, and a reporter or a journalist has met with Evelyn Hugo, who is an aged Hollywood icon. And Evelyn Hugo has agreed to do a tell-all about her life to this journalist, so the journalist can write like an autobiography for her. The story takes us from when Evelyn Hugo is a child right up until what's happened at the present day, and the biggest thing about Evelyn Hugo, which the press and the public like to nosy about the most, is about the fact that Evelyn has 7 husbands in her lifetime. I didn't know what to expect from this novel, especially when I heard that this was also an LGBT novel. I was like, how does that work? I don't know, but this honestly was the most beautiful romance that I'd ever read. I loved reading about the 7 husbands as well. If you've read it, you'll know that some of these relationships are just so beautiful. And without spoiling it too much, I definitely love that this book looked at different perspectives of what a marriage can mean and what a marriage can be. Marriage is definitely something that is beyond the certain box that people perceive it to be, where you marry the love of your life. who is your romantic partner in life. I guess that's not necessarily the case. That's not what all marriages do. It's not a one-size-fits-all relationship. So this is what I loved the most about this book, but it also did go into some very interesting themes about being LGBT, being how that's perceived in the media and the press, how that can affect your career. If you love books about like Hollywood glamour and trying to break into the classical 50s, 60s Hollywood cinema, then I think this book would definitely be for you. I would highly recommend this to everyone. I sat and read this in 2 days. It made me ugly cry at some points. I just had to like step away from it because I was just making this book wet with tears. If you've read Daisy Jones and the Six, there's like a twist at the end about who the narrator of the book actually is. There's something similar in this where the journalist is somehow connected to Evelyn Hugo in some way, and that's hinted throughout the book, and that's sort of like the main mystery, is how is the journalist connected to Evelyn Hugo. And I thought the twist at the end wasn't that great, if I'm honest. It was a bit anticlimactic, but I just loved reading about Evelyn's story in this. Highly recommend this to everyone. Definitely one of my faves if you are LGBT. Definitely read this. If you're interested in marriage as well, definitely give this a go. I think everybody would enjoy this of all ages. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect, and it surpassed whatever expectation that I had. That made no sense, but nothing about me makes sense. Since reading this, I've definitely encouraged a lot of people to read this because I don't know, this just warmed my heart. This was a special book, and I've already liked Taylor Jenkins Reid. I thought Daisy Jones and the Six was good because of like Billy's character, not necessarily for Daisy. So I was a bit worried that I wouldn't like Evelyn for some reason, but honestly, this book was fantastic. Phenomenal. I wish I could read this all over again for the first time. This is definitely a book that I'm going to be keeping on my shelves for multiple rereads. A stunning book. Absolutely stunning. Read it. Next, I'm going to move on to a book that was definitely a wild card for me. I actually really ended up loving it. It's another 5-star read. I didn't expect to have that many great books in a wrap-up video, but I actually have, so I'm very excited. This is Where the Crawdad Sings by Delia Owens. I got this book off my grandma. I knew this book was popular, it was big. I'd seen it on Instagram. I'd seen a lot about this, but I had no idea what it was about. And contemporary romance isn't my thing. I usually stay away from it. So, especially adult contemporary romance. So I stayed well away from this book, but I'm not gonna like turn down a free book, am I? So when my grandma said, I've read this, I think it's good, can you please read it? I was like, okay, like we have a little bit of a book club going on, me and grandma. And I don't know what it was about this that made me pick it up. Oh wait, yes I do. I had this video idea where I would read this and the Fletcher, and then like talk about how I'd read like the most popular contemporary romances of 2020 to see what I thought of them as someone that doesn't read that genre. And I did read the Fletcher, I'll talk about in a bit, but that video obviously never materialised. But this book was just like not what I thought it was going to be. Where the Crawdad Sings is set in North Carolina on like a marshy coast. It's set in the 50s and 60s, and boy, what a phenomenal book. At its heart, it is a contemporary romance, but it's also like a murder mystery crime as well. I just don't know what to say about this. The main character, Kaya, at the very beginning of her life, she lives in this shack, which is very derelict, and she lives there with her mum, dad, brothers and sisters. And from like the age of 4 or 5, her mother just leaves one day. And to her, because it's from her perspective, she doesn't understand why, she's unsure of what's going on. Then her older brothers and sisters start to leave until eventually she's left there alone with dad. And dad just doesn't take care of her, he doesn't enroll her into a school. She sort of turns into this child who is reliant on herself to look after herself, and she just sort of like eats food that she just finds lying around. She doesn't have an education, she brings herself up, and she does so with the help of the people in the town, but there's that will support her. She becomes known in this town as a teenager and in her late teen years as the Marsh Girl, and there's some perception that she's like a savage and that they don't want to associate with her, they don't want her in the town. But she's surprisingly self-sufficient and meets a boy. That's where the romance starts to kick in, but every now and again you have flashes forward into the present time, which is 1969, and a boy has been found young man, has been found dead in the town. And the town suspect that the marsh girl has committed the crime. The thing I loved about this book was definitely the crime aspect. The twist at the end absolutely had me going, oh my god, there's like a trial at some point in this, and my heart was like a pitter patter. And I actually did vlog some of this. Maybe I'll see if I can find the footage, but I was crying on the edge of my seat. If I've got some footage, I'll just put it in here. This book was like lyrical. It was beautiful. I do believe this is a debut novel as well. This is actually someone's first novel and I can't believe it. This book definitely goes into some big coming of age themes. There's a few trigger warnings that I would look up for on the internet if you are susceptible to some themes against women. I've never read anything like this. It was so original, and I would love to read more books like this, so if anyone has some suggestions for stuff like this, please leave them in the comments, but I honestly can't imagine a book being like this and me enjoying it so much. Because the main character is in her late teens, early 20s, I don't think I'd necessarily recommend it for teenagers. I think it's a bit too adult in its themes, but I think people like my age, like new adults, would absolutely love this book. I mean, it's great for all ages. My grandma loved it. The characterization and the character development in this was amazing. I felt like I could have been reading an autobiography. Everything just developed in a way that you would expect from a girl that's just gone through the worst possible start in life. And you really rooted for her as a person as well. Definitely one that I'm keeping on my shelves for a reread. There is no way I'm parting with this. This has been one of my best finds in a book for like in my whole life. This is just not something that I would have picked up on my own. Absolutely no way I would have picked this up. But I'm so glad my grandma gave me this and that I gave it a shot. So I guess that sort of leads me on to The Fletcher, which is a book that I read and I've given away to my auntie because I think that it's a book that she would enjoy, and it's not one that I would necessarily reread. So this is a contemporary romance comedy. It's got a lot of good comedy in it. It's based on the idea that rent in London is unaffordable, which it is. The main characters, who is, I can't remember, woman and man, have this arrangement where he will sublet the flat to the girl during certain hours of the day because he is a doctor and he works nights. So he will use the flat during the day when he's asleep and when girl is at work. And when he goes to work, girl will have the flat and then she's able to sleep on the night time. And because of this arrangement, they never come across each other and they live totally separate lives just in this tiny London flat together. And they do communicate through notes. They leave each other like handwritten notes, and it all starts off because she like makes a batch of brownies or whatever and leaves them on the table and says, you can have some if you want. He responds like, thank you, they're very nice. And their relationship develops through this note taking and note leaving that they'd leave every day for each other. This isn't a genre that I like, but I did think this was definitely an original take. I loved the way the relationship developed. It was well fleshed out as a book. It was quite long, and I don't know, even though I didn't really see myself relating to the characters at all, I definitely could see them like being friendly. I rooted for them. I wanted them to do well. If romantic comedy is your type of thing and you haven't picked up The Fletcher, I would highly recommend it. If you live in the UK, it's quite common in supermarkets, like quite cheap. So if you see it, I would recommend it. I'm not sure if I would continue reading things by this author. She does have, I think it's like Door to Door or The Switch or something. But just because it's not my type of thing, but when I did read it, I read it a lot, obsessively. I didn't want to put it down and I did enjoy it. It's just not my genre, but I still rated this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, going back into things that maybe are a bit more me, I read Loveless by Alice Osman. I think I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars or 4.5 out of 5 stars. I was so close to giving this 5 stars, but there's just a few things about it that it just missed out on. Loveless at its heart is about a girl who is discovering that she is asexual and what that means for her and her life. This book was really surreal for me because I went to Durham University. I was in Georgia's situation, being 18 and never had a partner and never been kissed, finding it really repulsive. Trying to understand how the ace spectrum in me met. Although in my experience this was a long time ago and it wasn't something that was really discussed. So I did kind of like do some self-developing while reading this book as well. Okay, I just had an Amazon delivery, so I've got like no idea where I'm up to. So Georgia, the main character, goes off to university, and the whole story is basically her living in halls of residence and how she feels about being a new student. She has to share a room with someone, which is a bizarre experience. And really at the heart of it, this book is about friendships and the connections that she has with her friends from back at home that have also gone to Durham with her, and this new girl that she's living in the room with. I really like this book. I just felt that this book was just too long. Not everyone's experience of asexuality and aromanticism is the same, so I wouldn't take this book by any means as like gospel about how you should feel if that's your experience of love and romance. But for me, I definitely think that this was something needed. There's not a lot of young adult, new adult about being ace, about the in LGBTQIA. So I think this book was a great addition to literature that is available for teens. It was written well and I liked the characters. And I love the focus on friendship as well, because friendships are really, really important. This was my first novel by Alice Oseman. I have read the Heartstopper series, but this was the first actual book of hers that I've read. I do also have I Was Born for This, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna like the rest of her books, because this just isn't a genre that I usually like, so we'll see. Next is my first book that I finished in this year. I just only said 2020. Honestly, 2021, 2020 just merged together at this point. And it was a book that I was really, really looking forward to reading, and that is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is the first book I've read by Margaret Rogerson. This book was a very weird reading experience for me. I've been looking forward to it for so long because I just love the idea of books being alive and ancient libraries and books being powerful. And when I was reading this book, I did enjoy it, but every time that I put it down, which was quite frequently, I just did not want to pick it back up. This book took me like 3 weeks to read. It is incredibly long, and again, I think this book is too long. And I discussed on Twitter a lot about how every time I put this book down, I didn't want to pick it back up, which was strange because I was enjoying it when I was reading it. And apparently I wasn't the only one with them feelings. I think I rated this 4 out of 5 stars in the end because I did think it got better toward the end. But there was times where I was reading this where I was just so disappointed. This is a young adult fantasy. Elizabeth lives in this great library. She's like an apprentice bookkeeper, but books are alive. They're like called grimoires. I know like that's an actual word, I just don't know how to pronounce it. And these are spell books. These are books written by magicians that have spells in. You've got different level of spell books, and they are kept to these libraries out of town just to keep them out of the hands of sorcerers that may be tempted to turn bad. There's different types of sorcerers. There's definitely a unique magic system in this. And one day Elizabeth, who is an orphan living in this library, being trained to become like a bookkeeper. She wakes up through the night and finds that her director has been killed by one of these books that has been reanimated and brought to like a living monster. She's able to fight off this monster and save the rest of the people that are sleeping, but she is then charged with the murder of her director. And this starts off like a series of events, an adventure where she finds herself teaming up with another young sorcerer, shouldn't say wizard, to try and get to the bottom of why these libraries keep getting attacked. I thought Elizabeth was maybe like a little bit flat as a character, but I loved Nathaniel Thorne, and Nathaniel is sort of like the romance lead. I thought he had great characterization, but I would recommend this book. I would recommend it to everyone, but at times I was disappointed and bored and felt like it went on for far too long. There was some action scenes where, I've got to be honest, I just skipped right ahead over them. I wasn't sure what was going on. One that I will be keeping in my collection because as much as I just love the premise, I just didn't really love the execution of it, but because I love the plot so much and I love the vibe, the atmosphere, I will be keeping it and I will give it a reread in the future. Maybe it was just me in that moment, and maybe I'll enjoy it in like a different setting or a different headspace. But definitely a worthy addition to anyone's book collection. And last but certainly not least, a book that's been on my radar a very long time, The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So The Cruel Prince, I wasn't sure what to expect from this book. At its heart, it's essentially a fairy tale. The main character is a human living in the Fae world. At the very start of the novel, she's a young child and she has two sisters living with mom and dad, and a fairy Fae turns up at the door, and it transpires he is the real dad of her oldest sister, and because the mother has escaped from his world with his child, that is a treasonable offence and he murders her parents. But out of duty he takes his daughter and her two half-sisters back to the Fae world, and he does look after them. The girls hold no resentment over him for doing this. They actually settle into Fae world quite well. It is like a very typical traditional Fae setting. It feels very like in the forest with flowers, oldie worldy, very magical, and I really enjoyed the world and the setting. There's like a cute little map in it. And I just kind of like wasn't sure where this book was going to go. I was enjoying like the lightness and the fluffiness of it and being a human in this world. And about halfway into this book was just like, what? There's like a big event in this. It turns a little bit dark. There's some action. 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm sat there like, what the hell is going on in this book? I did not expect this. I thought I was kind of reading like, oh, this is just like a little cute middle grade, and then it's like, no, I'm gonna give you some drama. Main character Jude isn't liked in the Fae world. They definitely see her like as not as good as their society because she's human. They definitely look down on her. She doesn't have a lot of friends. She's picked on, she's bullied, but she does get thrust into Fae politics and the royalty and the court and all these shenanigans and family dramas. I loved it. I thought it was a really great, fun book. Definitely a staple in YA as well. As soon as Waterstones opens, I'm going to Waterstones and I'm buying book 2 and 3 with my Waterstones voucher. I have to know what happens next. I absolutely love the characters in this. Jude is definitely, she has some flaws, but I hate it when a character is like too perfect. I love that she has flaws. She has an interesting relationship with her sisters. Her sisters herself are very interesting. How she is okay with everything that's transpired and now lives in this world, very interesting. She's definitely like very determined, perseveres with the situation that she finds herself in, where she's living in a world where she is not respected, trying to navigate normal teenage life and love in this situation, but also this relationship that she ends up having, which is kind of like love to hate, with her bully who is actually the Crown Prince. His character is great. I love sarcastic arrogance and he has it in abundance. There's definitely some twists and turns in this book. This is just fun. If you want like a fun Fae YA, I know it's got like over 1 million ratings or something on Goodreads and people are saying it hasn't aged well, but I'm just trash for this genre. Also my first book by Holly Black and I was very impressed with the writing. So yeah, apparently I've had a couple of good reading months. I've read a lot of good books in March as well, so if you're interested in seeing what I've been reading in this month, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my future content. Thank you for being here with me today. Leave me some recommendations for what you've been reading this year so far in the comments and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!